Welcome to the Curious Sapien podcast, where age old wisdom meets modern insights. Here, timeless ideas from philosophy, history, literature, and behavioral sciences are woven together to explain human nature and the ways of the world so that you become a better thinker and so that your curiosity is fed here. I'm your host, Srindra Fadnis, so let us dive into today's topic. So, here is my question for your audience. What do you understand by mental models? Let me explain. Mental models is a framework for how something works. For example, in your school days, you might have been taught how E is equal to mc square works. Of course, it's very tough to understand, but you are given a model of time-space relativity, which is one of the universal laws. So that is one example of mental model. And then take the algebraic equation a plus b whole square is equal to a square plus 2ab plus b square. That is also a mental model, right? So these mental models are like frameworks which explain how anything works related to a particular domain. Now, in the age of AI that we live today, it is important that you build a lattice work of mental models like Charlie Munger, the legendary investor and the partner of Warren Buffett rightly said. By lattice work, I mean you need some 70-80 models drawn from different disciplines like philosophy, history, psychology, literature, biology, physics, mathematics, even neuroscience, so that when you have a multidisciplinary framework, it becomes easy for you to look at a problem through different multidisciplinary lens. And this can be a huge advantage. Why? Because an engineer only thinks in terms of algorithmic thinking because that is how they were trained to do. And a UX designer, for example, I don't know how much of my audience is UX designers, but still I would like to explain this stuff. So a UX designer thinks in terms of design thinking. A lawyer thinks logically. A psychologist, thinks empathetically. So we have our dominant modes of thinking. Of course, they're good to have. I'm not saying that you should relinquish your dominant mode of thinking. But what I'm saying is that you need to integrate different modes of thinking to tackle a problem so that you arrive at the best conclusion, at the best decision. This is what the mental models serve. Now, let us look at some of the very famous mental models that we have. Very famous people such as Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger, of course, all these use mental models in their decision making. And no wonder their decisions are so fantastic. They make so much of money. They inspire us with their achievements. If you take Elon Musk, for example, he does something called as first principles thinking. So what is first principles thinking? It is nothing but breaking down problems to their most fundamental truths and reasoning upwards. Let me explain. For example, if you have to understand how business works, it all boils down to microeconomics. There should be there should be a demand for something, then there should be someone who can supply, and then business happens. So this simple demand supply business model, mental model of economics explains how the entire business works. Now we also have inversion. Instead of thinking how to succeed, how do I make money, how do I become the best version of myself, Charlie Munger says, invert the question. Instead of asking how to succeed, you just say, what is that which leads me to failure? Instead of saying, how do I become the best version of myself? You should ask yourself, what are the things that I should avoid to become a total failure? So you see, through inversion, you will get all the scenarios in your mind which helps you prevent the pitfalls so that you can avoid failure. So when you have eliminated everything which leads to failure, what is all left is the success. So this is the power of mental models. Now, why do we need mental models? I ask this again because the organizations the society that we live in today have become so siloed. People say there are, for every job is so specialized and hyper specialized that you get narrowed to one domain and you lose the perspective of how other domains work. Yes, specialization has its advantages, but what we need is that we need a multidisciplinary advantage of thinking so that we get a better perspective, we can take better decisions, and we it develops a kind of perspective taking ability, right? So let me trace the origin of silos, the origin of specialization back to the assembly era when Henry Ford, or the famous entrepreneur from US, was building the T model cars. So it so happened that when he was building cars, he wanted to do mass production, and mass production couldn't be achieved without specialization. And that is how, but it still persists. But in the kind of creative economy that we live today, in the kind of AI age economy that we live in today, it simply won't work. You need to be a generalist. So what I suggest is a kind of a T bar model of learning. Go deep in one field, but at the same time have diverse perspective on the related fields of your domain. If you study medicine, if you know how the medical education works, what they do is in the first 4 years of their degree, they study all the things, everything possible about the human body, and then they narrow in onto specialization. It can be nephrology, it can be cardiology, it can be neuroscience, it can be anything, right? So that is how it should work, because when you know how the related fields of your domain work, you can be a better professional, a better person, a better decision maker, and that saves you from so many wrong decisions in your life. One of the mental models which truly resonated with me is this 10-10-10 rule. I don't know where I heard it from, but it says, if you are worrying about a thing, if it impacts you for the next 10 years, then yes, it definitely deserves your attention. And if there is something which impacts you only for say 10 months, maybe, or 10 minutes, then don't worry about it. Just move on, right? So this is a particular mental model which stuck with me, and I use it as much as I can to eliminate worry from my life. And now, there is a story that I want to tell it with you. Once I was flying from Hyderabad to Bengaluru, and beside me was a neuro professional. He was a neuro doctor. So as during the course of a journey, I just started a conversation with him, and I asked him, what do you do? He said, I'm a neuro professional, I'm a neuro doctor. So out of curiosity, I asked, suggest me one book which helps me understand the human brain better. And he said something wonderful, okay? A very complex organ like brain cannot be understood in isolation. You need to understand the whole body first and how it is related to the brain, because of the obvious mind-body connection. It is the body that influences the brain, and the brain that influences the body. So he said you need to have a holistic view, and even if you understand the brain in silos, your understanding will be very superficial. And that's exactly how anything in this world works. You need to understand holistically, because anything that you take is connected to something else. Okay, so for example, take the example of neurons in the brain, okay, and they have electric signals are firing, right? So what is at play is obviously physics to a certain extent. It is chemistry, biology, of course. And then if we talk about the neuronal structure, we talk about histology, the study of cells. So a lot of multidisciplinary things come into picture. And this is how mental models work. So when you are using mental model to learn anything or to look at anything, what you're doing is having a kind of kaleidoscopic view of how something works. Now, let us explore, to make it easy for you, let us explore some of the concepts from psychology, okay? Take the confirmation bias. Okay, bias is nothing but your brain favoring information that you agree with. There is a saying that I read from the book Stumbling on Happiness, which says that your brain and your eyes are in agreement with each other. Your eyes only show you what is in the brain. So metaphorically speaking, what it actually means is that you only look at information that you are biased towards, and that is one example of confirmation bias. For example, if somebody says I'm a huge fan of Brad Pitt. Okay, now let us discuss some of the most famous mental models out there. The first one is obviously the Pareto principle. Pareto principle is also known as the 80-20 rule, which states that 80% of results come from 20% of inputs. For example, if you take a sales team, 80% of the revenue is generated by just 20% of the employees. Or if you take an organizational output, 20% of the employees do 80% of the work. And it is very empirically proven in so many trials, not only just in the organizational context or in the sales context, but across various fields. So when you know this model, you know, for example, you are trying to improve, say, your professional prospects. And there are so many things that you need to do, but if you can figure it out, what are those 20% activities which gives me 80% of the results, that drastically improves the chances of your success. And comparative advantage. So what is comparative advantage? This is one other example of a mental model that I want to discuss today. So comparative advantage is nothing but specializing in something where you are relatively good, relatively better, even if you are not the absolute best. So everyone has their own unique talent. So how I define talent is that if you can do something relatively a little better than others, then you are talented at that thing. I think this definition of talent always helped me to decide if I can do anything better than others. So you have your own comparative advantage. Maybe you are good at, say, documentation, or maybe you're good at getting along with people and orchestrating events, or maybe you are good at solving escalations at your workplace, or maybe you are good at taking charge. So everybody has their own comparative advantage, and you have to use it to your leverage so that you achieve your desired goals. So these are some of the examples of the mental models that I wanted to acquaint you with today. Hope you like my podcast, and if you like my podcast, please subscribe to me. And in the coming podcast, I would be bringing in so many interesting topics like this, which discuss ideas from various domains and how do we connect them and how we can make use of them to make better decisions and become better human beings as a result. Thank you for listening to my podcast.